This bracelet or bangle is similar to the spring-loaded Indian blanket bangle, except it is going to be glued together solid. Dimensions are very similar. It's composed of 8 staves with a 2¼ inch inside diameter, about 1.5 inches wide, and kind of a heavy, bangle. We'll go to the table saw and rip a piece of ebony and then chop it up into these staves. So here's a piece of ebony that I've milled nice and flat, nice and straight. It rides through the table saw very smoothly. The blade's at 22.5 degrees. The chop saw just cuts these pieces to length. These are technically short staves because the grain here is going vertically. Testing, got plenty of wood to the inside. Erasing any evidence of a saw blade, another test fit. Then the half ring technique, using little half pieces of dowel, gluing this together in 2 halves. A few hours later, this comes back apart, knock the dowels off, sand the ends. It just takes a little brushing with this sander. And then a few hours later, a little teeny tennant's been turned to fit the inside. I'll hold this in place temporarily, put some hot melt glue on there, turn the inside and the outside a little bit, but mostly the inside. I've got to focus on that inside diameter. I'm checking with an existing bracelet that my daughter wears to get the exact diameter that she prefers. Sanding the inside. Of course, that inside corner I couldn't really work on very effectively. So now I'll turn this around, put it in my chuck, and work on that. Now what's the outside edge? Clean that up, a little sanding. To do the outside, I'm going to use another jam chuck. Here's a piece of maple that I've mounted and turned to fit the inside of this with a nice snug fit. A little tapping on there, and this is ready to be turned on the outside. Because I'm going to add some elements to this bangle, I need this curve going side to side to be the same curve as the curve that goes around the bangle. To help me with that, I've cut a little template. This is the same curve that goes around. I can also check it with a square here to see if I'm consistent from edge to edge. But once I've achieved that, after a little bit of sanding, I'm going to put it in a jam chuck here. This is just some stacked layers of MDF that's been turned. It's been actually used several times before. Now I've taken another plate of MDF, clamped it on there, and chosen some spots where there were not existing screw holes. Put 4 screw holes in here. I need to orient it so I can always put it back in those same positions. Enlarge the screw holes slightly for my number 14 sheet metal screws. These screws are 1.5 inches long, so I'll snug this up, go to the lathe, take the center out of this. There's a parting tool removing most of the wood. Actually, it's MDF. Then I'll go in and undercut this to try to conform to the curve of my bangle, roughly. It'll take a couple of test tries to get this just right. Some little foam pads there help protect the surfaces. Now I've gone to 2-inch screws. It's real important that this be, quite snug. I mean, really, really tight, because you do not want that bangle to move during the next turning operations. Now, if my curve going side to side was accurately done, then I should be able to turn openings. But what to put in those openings? Well, I've taken some little pieces of pink ivory, some little pieces of holly. I'll first chuck this up and put a little short tenon on this pink ivory piece so I can turn it around. Once it's reversed, then I'm going to turn a series of very small tapered plugs. The taper is just a few degrees, just enough taper so you can see it is tapered. Part these off. I should be able to get about 3 plugs out of each one of those. That pencil mark that I just put was to tell me which way the grain direction is going. I'm also randomly turning the diameters. I want a range of about 3/8 of an inch to almost 3/4 of an inch in sizes. Now, once I have a variety of these pink ivory plugs on hand, I've now mounted holly with double-sided tape. I'll turn an opening and sneak up on a good fit with one of my pink ivory plugs. This is kind of fussy, finicky work. A lot of stopping and checking and stopping and checking. A little glue in the opening, a little glue on the plug, and then a little persuasion with a small hammer. I want a nice snug fit, not super tight, but snug. I've also aligned the wood grain going the same direction. I'll set this aside and work on another one. Now here's one that's being trued up after the glue is cured for a while, 10-15 minutes later. I'm turning another plug, another tapered plug. I also randomly turn different thicknesses of holly borders. I've discussed putting plugs into openings in a previous DVD, but because there's so much of that going on with this project, it's probably worth doing a quick review. The first mistake that people sometimes make is they try to put a square, straight-sided plug into a straight-sided hole. You only get one chance to make that work, and you're likely to miss this diameter. If this diameter is too small, then you're really, you're done. You can't make this hole smaller. All you can do is turn a new plug. So this does not work very well. Okay, a better way to do it is to turn your plugs first with a slight taper. The exact number of degrees doesn't really matter. Just make sure there's enough taper that you can see it. A few degrees is all it takes. Then, as you turn your opening larger and larger, and you test your plug fit, the first thing you want to do is have tightness in these corners right here. You want a gap to the outside, and when the resistance or the restriction from entering the hole happens, you want it to happen down here. Then you remove more wood, and the plug goes in deeper and deeper with each test, always maintaining that little gap way out here. And then the last wood that's removed down in here closes up that gap. If you do it right, if the last wood removal is here and you only had a smidgen of a gap out here, and you remove wood here lastly, then you're likely to have not only a visible tight connection there, but a pretty good connection all the way down through. That's the way I do it, and it seems to work pretty well. So here's my first plug going into the Bangle. I'm sneaking up on a fit just as I put the pink ivory in the holly. Now I'm putting the holly into this piece of ebony. I'm aligning the grain going edge to edge. I'll go do something else for 15 minutes, come back, and then true this up. I'm going to turn a little teeny depression. This will just give the exterior of the Bangle a little texture, if you will, when you pick it up. Run through the sandpaper up to 400 grit. This is just one identical step after another step. It's up to you as to how to decorate this. I chose to go with random sized polka dots, random sized borders, and random locations, but you could also do an orderly configuration if you wanted to. Each time I just look it over and pick a new spot, put another one in, do something else for 15 minutes, come back, clean it up, and look at it again. I'm pretty much done here. I've got, I think, one more spot right about here that I'll put one last polka dot in. The final step, I want to erase a few sanding marks that were going across the grain there. Then I'll buff it with a sanding mop going with the grain and prepare it for finish. Based on my experience with the pen blank necklace, I'm really impressed by this Krylon Crystal Clear. It really does a good job of keeping the white holly white. As good as any finish I've ever seen. Here's the final Bangle. You can obviously modify this technique to include different size polka dots, different species, different number of polka dots, endless possibilities with this technique.